Greetings, music nerds, and welcome to Season 6 of Music Makers and Soul Shakers. I am your host, Steve Dawson, coming to you from the Hen House Studio here in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm really excited to be bringing you this new season of shows coming to you on the first and third Wednesdays of every month. I have a great lineup of fascinating conversations with incredible musicians, songwriters, guitarists, steel guitarists, drummers, composers, who knows what else. I've been having an incredible time diving deep with these folks, and I know you're going to enjoy listening. Just a reminder that this year I've taken out the short song samples through the show, as things have gotten way more complicated as far as legal use of music goes, so I'll be making an accompanying Spotify playlist to each episode, which you'll find in the episode's show notes and at the website at makersandshakerspodcast.com. So anytime you hear this cute little slide guitar sound, you'll know there's a track to go along with it on the playlist. We have some new sponsors this year, but continue to be largely listener supported. Your help in keeping the show going is always appreciated, and you can do it with a one-time donation or a Patreon subscription. Patreon is a monthly payment of your choice, and when you sign up for that, you get a bit of added content as well as an ad-free version of the show to listen to. If you don't feel like kicking in any dough, that's cool too, but you can help by subscribing for free on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or just spread the word by sharing the show, following us on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and telling all your pals about it. You can get links to all this stuff, of course, at makersandshakerspodcast.com. Meanwhile, many thanks to our sponsors this season. Please check them out and let them know that I sent you. They are Isotope, Ear Trumpet Labs, Union Tube and Transistor, Black Mountain Picks, and Spectra 1964. Hey there, folks. Welcome back to Season 6 of the show. This is episode number 129. This week on the show is the great mandolin player, singer, and songwriter Sierra Hull. Sierra is an insanely talented musician, and it was great to have her on the show to talk about music. I hope things are rolling along out there for everyone. I've had a pretty good run here in the studio, doing a bunch of sessions, some remote stuff, and then a few full band projects as well, and mixes and stuff like that. And I also had the very thrilling debut of my pre-World War II acoustic Hawaiian band. We're called the Volcano Brothers. And it's myself and Fats Kaplan on ukulele and Dave Jakes on bass. And we ripped it over at the 5 Spot in East Nashville about a week ago, and I hope to do more of that. That was fun, the Volcano Brothers. Other than that, it seems like things are settling down a bit into some sort of semblance of normalcy, I guess, in my life and probably other people's lives too. Less tours seem to be getting canceled. Less plans are changing in the studio and gig-wise. We had the big, crazy Americana Fest here this week in Nashville, which I saw a little bit of, but honestly, I was pretty buried in the studio for most of it, so I did not get out and about too much. I hope to change that next year. Just a reminder that the Hen House Hang that you've been hearing about through this season now has some 2023 dates. And I know it's a bit early for that, but we are openly starting to book spots if you're interested in that. The dates will be September 18 through the 21st, 2023. It's going to be a blast, and I hope some of you listeners might consider coming out and being a part of it in 2023 to learn about recording and hang out with some like-minded folks who are interested in all that fun stuff. All right, so Sierra Hull, she's a monster player. And while she's still really young, she's been making records of her own for over 15 years now. The latest one is called 25 Trips, and it came out right around the time of you know what. And so her touring activities were curtailed for a while, but she's back at it now in full force. And she's also been really active this year with her own band, but then also with Cory, Wong, and Bela Fleck, being part of Bela's My Bluegrass Heart shows and album. And that's a killer album. I was really interested in talking to her about that project because I just kind of can't imagine how crazy that must be to be sitting in a room full of all your heroes that you grew up listening to and learning from, and suddenly they're your peers and you're right there in the mix with all of them. And in the bluegrass world, that project does not really get any heavier. It's Jerry Douglas and Bryan Sutton, Sam Bush, Bela, of course, Chris Thile, Noam Pikelny, Stuart Duncan, Billy Strings, Molly Tuttle. They're all involved. It's a great album, well worth checking out, My Bluegrass Heart. Billy and Sierra and Molly kind of represent the new cats on the block, but the rest of the crew's pretty much been at the top of the heap kind of since the 80s. You know all those names probably. Pretty crazy. Anyway, Sierra has made some amazing solo albums as well, with producers like Allison Krauss and Bela Fleck. And on her latest one, 25 Trips, she's co-producing with a great engineer named Shani Gandhi. And the album is definitely rooted in bluegrass, but it steps out into some more experimental territory as well, with some killer sounds and production concepts and ideas. And the crew on this album includes Justin Moses, Viktor Krauss, Bryan Sutton, Paul Franklin, Jano Rix, the great percussionist from the Wood Bros, and lots more interesting musicians. So we got to talk about how she approaches making music these days, and all about how she prepares as a side person for some of the heavy gigs that she's involved in as well. She is out on tour all the time these days, and you can keep up with what she's doing and where to see her at sierrahull.com. And before we get going here, I would just like to shout out to a couple folks who made donations or signed up over at the Patreon page in the last couple weeks. Tanya Hargraves and Jamie Pinson. Many thanks, you guys. Couldn't do it without you. And also just a reminder that we are giving away a really cool Union tube and transistor pedal. It's called the C-Verb pedal at the end of this season, and it's going to a random Patreon subscriber. So if you're already subscribed, or if you subscribe before the end of this season, you'll be enrolled in that cool giveaway. And thanks to Union Tube and Transistor for supplying that pedal. All right, let's get down to it. Enjoy my conversation with Sierra Hull. Yeah, I wondered if we could maybe just dive in and start talking about some of the stuff you've been doing lately and what's coming up. I noticed you've got this tour coming up with Cory Wong, and I'm not clear what your role is exactly in that tour. Like, I think the billing that I saw said special guest. So I assume that you're sitting in with his band, and are you bringing your band out, or like what's happening exactly?
Yeah, I hear you. So I'm going out, and I'm going to open the shows each night solo, okay, but then with some of Cory's band joining me as well. So it'll be probably like a 30-minute opening slot where I'll go out solo, play a couple things. My friend Eddie Barbash, who I've made a lot of music with, is a sax player on tour with Cory right now, and he's actually toured with me a little bit too. He's an amazing player. So we have a history together of playing some. So he'll come out, we'll play a few, and then a few other guys in the band will come out. And so it'll kind of be like building into the evening. Okay. Then I'll hand it over to Cory, and then they'll do 2 sets, I think is sort of the plan. And I will guest some on set 1 with the band. And then he has Antoine, another guest out as well. So, yeah, should be fun. Should be a blast, just, of an evening, getting to kind of both do some of my own stuff, but also sit in with them and get to play some of their music as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that's been a big part of your life, is the collaboration aspect. And I wonder, in that sort of situation, I'm not totally that familiar with his newest stuff. Like, he's usually out with a pretty big band. Is this like a full-on Cory Wong extravaganza with like big horn section and everything?
It'll be a full-on party. I think the band's like, 6 horns or 4 horns or something like that. I mean, it's, rhythm section and, drums and percussion. I think maybe 4 horns for this tour. But yeah, it's going to be a party.
Does he bring a bunch of singers out with him too? Or is it just like people in the band singing the odd song, or is it all instrumental, or what's his deal these days?
Well, I think Antoine Stanley is, I think, a frequent guest, or maybe he's more of a member. I think he's more just a guest with Wolfpack, which Cory is as well. So they've collaborated a lot there. And so Antoine is a vocalist. And so he'll be kind of joining, I think, as the other guests on the second part of the night. And, I think I'll probably sing a little bit with them. So yeah, there'll be some vocals, but it's all, Cory's music's mostly instrumental. So I think most of the singing across the night will come from me or Antoine.
Instrumentally, like, how do you have to prepare for a tour like this? Is there a lot of pretty intense, like, his stuff is so rhythmic and like precise. Is there a lot of stuff for you to actually learn? Or are you kind of out there as a soloist and kind of winging your part of it with him? Or how do you prepare for a tour like that?
Yeah, well, so he sent me a few things that we hadn't played together yet. So it's interesting. My relationship with Cory goes back really to 2020, where we were both sitting at home like everybody else when all of the tours canceled, and he's a really productive guy, so he's always working on music and recording, and so he did this project called Trail Songs, and it was 2-part EPs where there was like a dusk and a dawn version. And so I was he reached out to me and said, hey, I'm working on this project and really would love to collaborate with you. I think this particular song, mandolin, would be great on. Would you want to, be a featured guest on the project? So I said, oh yeah, of course. So I literally recorded my parts at home, sent them back. It's a total virtual collaboration. And then the record came out, and we still hadn't actually met in person, but we had spoken to each other via Zoom. So like we'd had a couple Zoom meetings just like this where, we'd kind of hung out, or I did a thing for Eno Hammocks in Sierra Nevada brewery during the pandemic, where I interviewed a couple folks just for social media, basically, as kind of like none of us are at festivals right now, so here's some artists kind of hanging out and collaborating. So we had kind of done a few things together just through, him initially reaching out to me to be part of that project, and I really loved getting to be part of that. We just had fun, being able to collaborate together virtually. And then I actually only met him for the first time earlier this year. He films this variety show type thing for YouTube, and he was taping a bunch of those. So I went and was part of that for one of the episodes. And so we wrote a tune together via Zoom as part of that. So now it's like we've got a couple things that we've actually done together. I learned another one of his tunes for that particular taping that we did. And so, we've already got a few things that we've played together. So some of it will just be doing that I already know because we've already played it together or wrote it together. And then there was a couple other new tunes to learn. So yeah, it's kind of a combination of both kind of relearning some of the stuff we either wrote or recorded together. And then, me getting to dive in and learn a few of his tunes that I didn't know yet. So
that's a big band with probably quite a big crew and like just a generally large traveling party. Are there a lot of nerves going around about just like everyone staying COVID free and all that? Like that must be nuts these days.
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing some stuff so I was out with Sturgill Simpson and Bela Fleck in September, and then my band for, a whole, month of busy touring and then diving into this. So at least I feel like, okay, I've been really used to testing, frequently and wearing masks and trying to be, as careful as possible. So I just think everybody's just kind of doing their best to be mindful of it and, hoping. We had one show cancel in Toronto. We were supposed to go up to Canada for that one show. And so far everything else is still happening, and
that's good.
Trying to follow all the COVID procedures, as closely and carefully as possible. And of course, we're all vaccinated, boosted and all that kind of stuff. So, just trying to do our best to navigate in these crazy times, I think, and I just think trying to be mindful and respectful of people in their space and masking up when we can and asking the audience to, try to be kind and respectful to each other's space as well as much as possible. I mean, I think that's about all we can really do right now other than just cancel everything,
totally.
So, and nobody wants that to happen, but, of course, nobody wants to be getting sick or feeling like you're worried about that, for people that might be coming to the shows. So yeah, it's tricky to navigate, but I think,
I saw your Toronto date on your website, and I'm Canadian too. And I know how bad it is up there right now. Yeah. I live in Nashville, but I'm from Vancouver, and,
oh, cool.
I mean, I know how crazy it is up there right now. And I was surprised to see that date was happening, and apparently it's not. So there you go.
Yeah, I know. So I appreciate you even doing this virtually too. Cause part of me is just trying to lead up to it, kind of going, oh, it'd just be such a bummer to roll the dice right before getting ready to leave because I leave Tuesday, I think. So, it's like, oh, just so close. So far, so good.
I would have ended up canceling because I think I have COVID right now. So
no, really? Oh my gosh! I just talked to my best friend. She's got it too. It's happening, unfortunately.
I'm not sure yet, but my daughter's friend has it, and she was over there, and their other friend they have a little band, and their friend also in the band got it. So everyone in the band has it. She's sick. She's tested negative, but we think that she's probably got it. So anyway, so yeah, this last while has been pretty intense for you, like the whole Bela, Carnegie Hall, Ryman swing, and I don't know how many other dates you're doing with them exactly, but that I saw there was a film. I don't know if it was done like for a TV broadcast or something, but there's like the entire show from, I think it's Carnegie, although maybe it's the Ryman, is up on YouTube now. And
on YouTube, I think that's the Ryman. I saw that. My manager was like, "Whoa, the whole thing's up on here." Yeah.
Yeah. It's incredible. Like, can you tell me a bit about how, like, I know you played on the record, the Bluegrass Heart record, and I know that you go way back with Bela, so you've got that relationship going, and a lot of those guys from that crew too. But I mean, tell me a little bit about the prep involved as a musician, like as a mandolin player. There's other mandolin players up there. Some of your heroes are up there, both on the mandolin and other instrument wise. What's that like as a relatively young, like you're way younger than most of those people that are up there. What's that like for you as a musician, like both like psychologically, but also preparation wise? How do you deal with it?
Oh, I mean, it's unbelievable. I don't think you ever get over the opportunity to play alongside your heroes. Even if you've done it quite a bit, it's still just like one of those things where, especially on a show like that, I mean, those two shows were really special in that. So Bela took out, made the record. So for anybody that's not heard it, like the record's his first bluegrass album in 20 years, and say bluegrass, Bela bluegrass, still very progressive bluegrass, but a bit of a return to the roots, and him collaborating with guys like Jerry Douglas and Stuart Duncan and Sam Bush, Edgar Meyer, Bryan Sutton, these guys that he's made a lot of music with over the years. But then also, bringing in some of the younger generations, myself, Chris Thile, who I know is a little bit older than me, Molly, Tuttle, Billy Strings, Dominic Leslie, like a lot of just really amazing. I mean, I could go on and on. And then you have like David Grisman, and people like that on this project too. So it's a real coming together of generations in a cool way. So to get to be a part of that was really special because I grew up, adoring Bela's albums like Drive and the Bluegrass Sessions, and
I love that Drive
being
album.
I mean, who doesn't? It's just like if you love this kind of music, then it's just right up there at the top of the list of influential albums and music that really inspired a whole new generation of people. So to get to be part of a project that kind of feels like a coming together of both those original guys that made those records, and then, even for me, like Chris Thile being one of my big heroes, he's sort of like the generation in between me and Bela, so like you have sort of this, this kind of cool hybrid of folks on this project. So whenever the record came out, Bela had a tour. He had two tours that he did, two pretty large tours, one in September and then another one in, I guess, end of November through December. And the first one, it was two different bands. So the first one was pulling people from the record. So it was me, Bryan Sutton, Mark Schatz on bass, Brian on guitar, Michael on fiddle, my husband Justin kind of playing multiple things, Justin Moses, so playing dobro, twin fiddle, twin banjo, twin mandolin, and then Bela. And so that first version of the band went out, did, most of the month of September, like almost three weeks. And then in the second round of the tour, it was the Telluride House Band, which is, Sam Bush and Jerry Douglas, Stuart Duncan, Edgar Meyer, Bryan Sutton on that tour as well. And so,
and were you on that part or no?
No. So they were two separate tours. So the one band went out and did that, and then the other band went out. And so Bela's been out playing this music like crazy. We rehearsed a ton leading, like, before the tour that we did in September. So we had this opportunity to, really work on this music because we had this tour. So I'd played on some of the music on the record, but only like 5 of the 19 tracks. I mean, there's, a lot of great players on there and so much music. So it was really an opportunity to not just dive into the music that I had already played on, but to dive into the whole record and learn all of it. And so there was a ton of prep work before that tour. So thankfully, I had already been able to go out on the road and play this music with Bela and kind of dive in. So by the time we got to the shows at the Ryman and Carnegie Hall, and those were just 2 really special shows that, kind of one time only sort of thing with both bands, plus Chris Thile, Molly Tuttle, and Billy Strings. So it was like a big cast, between the original, I say the original band, Telluride House Band, the band that went out in September, and then, adding in those other 3 guests. And so this was a cool show, and those 2 shows were really cool in that, it was a lot of people trading off different variations of different bands, a couple things where it's like, both Stuart Duncan and Michael Cleveland are out on stage playing fiddle, or, suddenly there's 4 fiddles on stage, or like, here's, something where Sam Bush and I both get to play at the same time on something, so it's really unique and special in a way that, I think we were all kind of looking around going, this is so cool. This is so fun, so I feel really lucky I got to be part of that.
I take it all those things were totally planned, right? Like, it wasn't just a matter of like you standing on the side of the stage going, I'm going to jump in on this one. It was like...
No. It was all planned. Yeah, for sure. Very mapped out.
So, I mean, tell me about your mandolin preparedness level. Like, do you have to, like, how long does it take you to get ready, maybe for that first leg of the Bela stuff where you didn't know all the stuff, and like you knew the songs that you played on, but you had to kind of figure out the rest of the record? That's a lot of stuff to learn. It's really complicated music. It's really, I assume you're memorizing it all. Like, you're not reading on those kind of gigs, so you need to have it all. Yeah.
Sure.
So walk me through a little bit of what it takes for you as a musician in that situation to prepare and feel like really confident going to, even to show up at rehearsals feeling confident.
Exactly. I think that's the big thing, is like, you don't just go into rehearsal not knowing anything. I mean, the goal is to show up to rehearsal and already know all the music. And then therefore, then you join up with all the other people who already know the music, and you try to, make it feel solidified, into, a band kind of dynamic where, and then things change from there, where it's like, okay, well, cool. We didn't do it this way on the record, but there's an idea to have some kind of moment in the show where something opens up, or somebody, plays a different kind of thing, or Bela's such a creative person that, I love that he's not always like locked into, well, we recorded this way, so this is exactly how it has to be. If there's an opportunity for something special to happen in the live setting that even is like, arranged and orchestrated or whatever, then, there's still always those options of how to make things even better, on the table. So for me, it was like, taking the record versions of these songs and trying to really sit down with the recordings and just learn them. And, that's, for me, the process of that is listening to the record a bunch. And I was lucky because early on, Bela and I haven't really worked together like this before, until this project, where I got to actually record on some of his music and really get in there and really learn and practice this music with him. But he did produce a record for me called Weighted Mind a few years ago. And so I got to work closely with him kind of wearing the producer hat, which is a different dynamic. But I knew enough to know that whatever Bela's working on, he's in it, 200%. And I'm like that. I love, like, if I'm going to do something, I love really trying to dive deep, and get in there. So I love getting the opportunity to work with somebody that really cares like that. That isn't just going to be like, well, that's good enough. It's like, no, let's really try to make this the best it can be. So I think there's already that precedent that's set in knowing that, okay, we're going on tour with Bela, so better have your crap together.
Yeah, man, totally.
And not that I wouldn't for any gig, but I think there's already that standard that's set. That's kind of cool in that way, that it's like, okay, everybody's going to show up knowing what to do. And so that's exciting in that way. So for me, so anyway, I say all that to say I had worked with Bela in that, working on my record. I think he knows that I'm serious about whatever project I'm working on, and that from a studio standpoint, even like listening to mixes and things like that, or listening for particular things or hearing little edit glitches or whatever kind of stuff, I really kind of love doing that and love getting in there on the kind of nitty gritty parts of projects. So he actually, when he was working on the mixes for this record, he mixed the whole record himself. And you know how it is, if you're working on something, you kind of just need the second set of ears. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole record was recorded at his home studio. Mixed by Bela. And so he had a few other musicians that he sent the tracks to kind of listen and give notes, like, oh, I think that right here, the, fiddle could be turned up, or I hear something kind of funny here, or, whatever. So I was lucky to be one of the people that got to hear the record early and got to, just make some mix notes and give him my thoughts on all that. Which is bizarre to me. I don't know why he would have me be one of those people, but I got to hear this music, in some ways pretty early, even before I was trying to learn it. And so I think part of it is like, okay, well, you get to really listen to the music when you're kind of in the process of trying to listen deep and talk about mix notes. And so I'd already been spending some pretty serious listening time with the record before even trying to learn the stuff. And then, so I had a head start on a few tracks that I had actually played on. And then it's a matter of just actually getting the instrument out and kind of going, okay, so how does this crazy line on Slippery Eel go? Like how, now I got to learn this. And so I have a program actually that I use quite a bit called Transcribe. Have you ever heard of that?
No, what is it?
It's essentially like the Amazing Slowdowner or something. And I know there's 1,000 ways you can do that these days, just slow things down. But I like it because you can actually it shows you the wave file, like if you were in a Pro Tools session or something, but you could actually highlight certain sections of the tune. You can actually, in the program, like make some markers, like you could say in a Pro Tools session where you might put like verse 1 or chorus. So for me, sometimes if it's something really kind of complex, because I don't have charts on any of this stuff, I was just trying to kind of make my own way with it. Eventually Bryan Sutton did make some like basic chord charts, but even just keeping track of like, sections or things like that, when I was practicing along, it's like you could see the whole wave file if you want, or you can zoom in or zoom out. But say you zoom out and this is the whole track, then you can go in and you can be like, okay, here I see that the fiddle solo is coming up, or I see the mandolin solo is coming up. So I can just like make a couple little notes. Then if I went, okay, this section's always really hard, or I keep messing the chords up here, or I can like loop it. So I can like highlight it and loop it and just practice one part of it for a while. So it's kind of a process of digging in slowly. That's called Transcribe? It's called Transcribe, with an exclamation mark.
I gotta check that out.
It's I forget, it's like maybe $50 or something, to have the computer version, but it's really handy, a handy tool to have. I use it a lot.
Handy, You mean it's slowing it down, but it's keeping it in pitch, right?
Yeah, the pitch stays pretty good. I mean, obviously if you go crazy with it, then, it's always a little hard to really make sense of it. But even just, being able to slow something down enough to just check your work, I mean, it sort of speeds up the process. If you're learning something, it's like, I go, shoot, we have way too many tools available to us these days to not take advantage of it. I mean, could I sit down and learn it at full speed? Of course, I think most anybody could if they just really, want to spend time doing it. But when you've got that much music to learn and you're really trying to digest it, it's like, it's so good to just use these kind of resources to be able to slow things down or loop things. Or one of the things, I didn't end up using it too much. I mostly played along with just the album versions of stuff, but Bela made everybody practice versions of the songs without the instrument they were playing on. So say it was something Sam Bush played on, because he recorded it all at his house and he's got all the files, he just muted the mandolin, for example, and could send a version that you could practice along with that, like you're the person in the band. So that's also a good way to kind of work on stuff. Yeah. I know, for real.
Amazing. So you mentioned there's no charts. Were there ever charts? Like when you went in to do the session, is he charty at all? Or do you just show up and he's like, hey, here's a tune?
It's surprisingly casual for somebody that's like that in depth about everything. In that, you know, Bela he laughed and he said, I can make charts, but nobody ever likes my charts. So he just didn't make any. And so it was kind of like, he's like, everybody rewrites their own charts anyway, so nobody's going to like my chart. So there might have been like a little thing here and there where it was like, here's this, I think I remember on a tune Strider I played on, there's this whole line at the end that's like, you know, you know, there's like all this kind of stuff to learn that everybody was going to play in unison. And I think he had some notation of it, but I don't even think he did it. I think maybe somebody else, I don't even remember. Because he doesn't really read music, you know, as a banjo player. Yeah. It's more tab usually is what people deal with when they're talking about the banjo. So, and I mean, gosh, in the bluegrass world, most of us just don't grow up using those kind of things. It's such a organic learn by ear. So, I mean, on the original tunes, Strider being an example, he was kind of writing it right up until the minute we went to record it. So it was like he sent a voice memo of him literally just playing some of the parts on banjo. And then, you know, it was very much like we had a rehearsal and then kind of worked out some kinks, or he gave some ideas, but it was also everybody could show up and bring their own individual voice and ideas to what the kind of general dynamic would become of the song. And, you know,
so for that record,
some of your own lines and stuff.
For that record, you weren't showing up blind. Like you had at least gotten some voice memos or whatever, so that you had some melodies and some ideas. Sure. Okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was a song on the record called Wheels Up where he had played it once with the Telluride House Band at Telluride, and there was a YouTube video of them playing it. At the time, I think it was called Seasick in the Mountains. It was just like a new tune that they had played. And so there was, you know, this cell phone YouTube video from Telluride Festival of the band playing it that he sent and was like, hey, here's this tune. And so, you know, you just kind of learn what you can of it and try to show up and be, you know, fairly prepared. But then the rest of it's just kind of, you know, working out kinks, you know, as we went along.
So you mentioned reading, and I think you went to Berkeley, right?
I did. Mm-hmm.
So did I. So nice. Do you read on the mandolin? Like, can you sight read and stuff?
Very slowly. I didn't grow up doing it. And even when I went to Berkeley, I had never, I mean, it was just, it was not part of my world at all. And though I did do some of it there, my Berkeley experience was not necessarily your normal Berkeley experience, which is, I guess, a story in and of itself, in that I did a thing called an artist diploma program. And it was just a little bit, you know, kind of dabbling in all these different areas and stuff like that. So I did a little bit, but all that stuff was so over my head at that point. Cause I mean, I literally couldn't have even told you at that point where, you know, a B note was on the staff, as crazy as that sounds. At that point, I kind of wasn't preparing to go to Berkeley. And then the opportunity to go to Berkeley came up, and then I kind of just dove in without having, it's not like I was like preparing for this Berkeley experience where I was practicing all my sight reading and things like that leading up to it. So it was kind of like, that was really a good opportunity for me to go, what are all the things I really should be thinking about and working on? And that was sort of like the beginning of me starting to work on setting reading as a goal. And it's something that, you know, I don't use all the time. So it's one of those things where over the years, I've gotten to where I can do it, and I'm better at it than I've ever been, but I'm also still terrible at it. You know what I mean? Compared to, you know, compared to like where I would like to be with it.
Yeah. When I was there wasn't really like the string emphasis that there has been in the last 15 or so years there. And they really like browbeat me. Like, it was very much a jazz like approach to learning, and they really browbeat the reading thing into me, even though I was trying to play like dobro and slide guitar and stuff, and I was sort of in weird tunings a lot of the time, and I was still trying to read anyway because I thought it would be a fun challenge, I guess. But they were really insistent at that point that everybody had to read like really proficiently. I was a good reader back then. I'm terrible now, but
oh, that's awesome. Well, I think that around the time I went, it was right at the beginning of the American Roots program. And I think that they kind of really understood when people were coming in, this has not been a part of most of these people's worlds, so we're here to kind of help set the stage for that and to kind of point them toward, the value in these things while also understanding that, like, it's just not a tool that people use a whole lot in our world, more now than ever, I guess, before. And I would say, like, if somebody sends me a piece of music, sends me the notation on something, it's not helpful. Yep. These days, it can be helpful, but at the same time, if you send me a recording, I'm going to be able to learn it, a lot faster than it's like the notation can be helpful for me to check my ear and make sure that I'm, playing something right, and might speed it up in some cases. But it's still pretty low on my skill sets that I would say I'm really excelling. Yeah.
So as far as your early stages of learning, like when you were a kid, I don't know how young you were when you started playing the mandolin, but you grew up in Tennessee, right? So like, were you surrounded by bluegrass? Were your parents into it? Was that all that you like? Were you one of those kids that was like super deep into bluegrass, or were you into all kinds of different music?
Oh, I mean, when I grew up in church hearing music there early on, and I say hearing music there, not like excellent piano and choir, more like mountain me kind of, singing out of the hymn book. Anybody could get up and do a song, very casual, as they say, listen to the words, not the way I sing it, kind of was a quote, I heard a lot as a kid.
Where was this? What part of Tennessee did you grow up in?
So northern Middle Tennessee, Byrdstown is the town. So an hour north of Cookeville. Yeah.
Okay.
So BYRD. So up near Del Hollow Lake and all that. So, just south of the Kentucky line. And it's a beautiful part of Tennessee. But it's the smallest county in Tennessee that I grew up in. And there's 900 people and no red light. I mean, it's a tiny little spot. So, my church experience even was just very casual in that way, the music was very casual. It wasn't pre-planned or anything like that in the church. So I grew up singing a lot in church, and, my brother and I started singing. We'd get up and sing a song every once in a while and that kind of a thing. And so music was part of my world early on in that way, that I've sang ever since, I was a little kid, not in a way that I would have ever thought about my voice in a serious way or really thought of myself as a singer, but everybody from my mom to my granny to whoever, sang, but wasn't trying to be on stage, if that makes sense. So when I was 8, I got my first instrument. My dad had just recently bought a mandolin, was starting to go to some bluegrass jams. And my mom's uncle, my great uncle, lived next door to us. So thankfully he was kind of that musical influence on my dad to where he loaned my dad a guitar. My dad started learning just enough chords to be able to play for my brother and I when we would sing in church. And then my dad had always loved the mandolin and had thought that when he was a kid, he would have loved to have had one, but the family couldn't afford one. And so he finally saved up enough money and bought one when I was probably around 7 or so. And it was around that time that when he was going to those jams, I have an older brother, and he was trying to get my brother Cody interested in playing. So I remember, I have like a really distinct memory of my dad sitting there with my brother, like showing him a couple of chords on the guitar, or like there was a banjo my dad had got somewhere and was trying to, be like, well, here's how the banjo works, rolling on the banjo. Yeah. And I just remember thinking, well, I want to play something too. Like if he's going to play, I want to play, because I adored my brother and wanted to be just like him, so,
yeah.
So I got a fiddle for Christmas, and it was just a full size. It was too big for me to reach. My granny and aunt and uncle went in together and bought it for me. And so because the tuning is the same, and my dad had been learning to play the mandolin, he said, well, I know you can't really reach the end of the fiddle, but, I could probably go ahead and show you a tune on the mandolin, and you'd at least know where to put your fingers, and we'll get you a smaller fiddle. But in the meantime, let me show you how to play a tune on here. And
Good
so
idea,
I was like,
Dad.
okay. And he taught me my first mandolin tune. And I don't know. I kind of.
What was it? What was the first?
Went from there and just fell in love with it immediately. It was a tune called Boil Them Cabbage Down. Have you ever heard that?
All right. Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Wow, that's cool.
One of the staple basic tunes.
Did you get super obsessed with it right
Yeah.
away? You were just, okay. Did you have a way to play with other people your age or anything? Or were you mostly playing like with your dad and his friends and stuff?
Yeah, it was definitely just playing with my dad at first. And then, of course, my brother eventually started. He never quite got into it like as obsessively as I did because he was into all kinds of things, sports, and, had lots of hobbies. But for me, for some reason, that just really, it just became my thing. And I knew pretty immediately, this is what I want to do with my life,
Really?
Pretty soon.
Like when you were 8 or 9?
Yeah. I don't
Awesome.
know. It's really when we got into bluegrass, I started going to these jams, and, the community is such a beautiful community within, the bluegrass and folk old time world. It's just people are of all ages, in my case, being in such a rural area, we'd go to these jams, like 30 minutes from our house or whatever. And there wasn't really any young people. I mean, it was literally like me and 60 and above,
Yeah.
and mostly old dudes, and so I would, but there was never a time where those folks were not just loving and welcoming to me and saying, hey, come join our circle and let me sit there and chop along on the mandolin and include me even when I had no clue how to play, really. And I was learning a few tunes. And so they'd say, well, do you want to play a tune? And maybe I would say, I know Bull Them Cabbage Down, and we'd play it because I knew it,
Yeah.
And it's just such a wonderful, sweet thing. So I think that experience of just being able to have that where I could be welcomed into a circle where maybe it wasn't like total virtuosic musicians, but these people could play. I mean, they could play and they knew the tunes, and and I learned the catalog. I learned all the standards from just constantly listening to it and being around it. So yeah, it became a big part of our life in that way.
So it was for you, like as far as learning the vocabulary of the trad bluegrass stuff, it was more just like being around those people playing it. Like you weren't sitting there learning it off records necessarily. It was more just like the experience of being around these people that knew the tunes.
Well, it was both. It was both because we were pretty obsessed with it all. So it was like, yes, every weekend, at least 2 jams a week on the weekend. Friday and Saturday night were like always going to these jams that would happen. And then every week we would get a new CD from somebody. Like, we'd discover the only place to buy music back then. I mean, this was like, pre-Spotify and all that stuff. The only place that you could really buy CDs, because there wasn't a music store in my little hometown or anything, or really anywhere close to there, was Walmart. Back then, they used to have a decent bluegrass section, and so we'd go in Walmart. Yeah, we'd go in Walmart, and that's where we would find our CDs. And so I remember I got my first Allison Krauss album there, my first Nickel Creek album, and you might not find like the lesser known bluegrass folks there, but like, I mean, all the Rounder, Sugar Hill type catalog stuff was actually in the store back then. So we'd find that, or I remember us finding like the first Tony Rice albums that we got from some flea market or something, finding just used things, some unopened copy of something that came out like 20 years before I was born or something, but they happened to have all this music. So, I mean, it was just like we were just learning about all these people that became my heroes, within those first few years of me playing. And I just fell in love with it and would look at those albums and think, wow, that's what I want to do. So, it was a combination of all that, learning from the recordings and learning from even books. I mean, I remember I had some tablature books and things like that early on. So I was learning that way as well, where,
were there some, like you mentioned Allison Krauss, were there some other like big ones for you that really stood out? Like whether it was, I don't know if you were into specific mandolin players or not back then, like was, as far as the mandolin goes, were there some main influences? I guess probably Adam Steffi would be one of them, because you were really into Allison Krauss, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Adam, one of my biggest influences ever, especially because I feel so madly in love with that band and those albums. I mean, they were like my biggest heroes ever. Oh yeah. I mean, like that was, if I really had like to pick one hero or one obsession, I mean, Allison and those records were it from. The earliest mandolin I really remember hearing was probably Doyle Lawson, because Doyle Lawson and Quicksilver, they made, he has a ton of albums, but also a lot of like 4-part harmony gospel singing that I remember, since I started singing and hearing music in church. I remember that being some of the first music that we tried to learn to sing, even before I was really playing mandolin. So I remember hearing the mandolin in that context, and then, of course, I started playing about a year after playing, got, an Allison album, Adam Steffi, of course, Sam Bush. There was a band called Blue Highway that's, was one of my all-time favorite bands. Who's
the mandolin player in that band?
Sean Lane, who, he's such a ridiculous singer and songwriter that sometimes people don't always talk about his mandolin playing, but he's a great mandolin player. Ricky Skaggs. And then, of course, later,
right,
David Grisman and Mike Marshall. And of course, we bought the first Nickel Creek album because Allison produced it, and I was obsessed with Allison. So we got that album, and then next thing I know, I'm hearing, Ode to a Butterfly, the opening track on that album, and hearing mandolin, like, wow, I've never heard anything like this before. So, exactly. So, I mean, there's just, Ricky Skaggs, the list kind of goes on and on.
He's incredible too, that guy, man. He plays his ass off. What about John Reichman? Were you ever into Reichman?
John's music I didn't actually discover till much later on. And he's an incredible player, and just like his tone. And of course he's got this like, infamous mandolin that everybody in our community loves. He's got as far as the lore goes, he's got like one of the best ones. So
he's a friend of mine from Vancouver, so I've played with him a bunch.
Oh yeah. Awesome. Well, I was going to say, I've gotten to know him a little bit in recent years, and he's just such a sweetheart of a person too. So I've loved what opportunities I have had to play with him now as an adult. It's been awesome.
Yeah. I think anytime he hangs out with Chris Thile, he has to watch his back and keep his mandolin very secure.
I know. Chris wants that mandolin.
He knows it. For you now, like, songwriting is such a big part of what you do too. Like, at what point did you start writing songs?
I started writing tunes pretty early on. And I remember my brother and I even wrote a couple, just simple vocal tunes back when. My dad even started, kind of coming up with song ideas. So, some of the early writing I did was sort of within the family, either me doing something or my brother and I wrote a couple things together, or my dad would mostly write the song and I would maybe steer the music a little bit, early on. And then it was really so I'd always written a little bit, but then it was really when I got into my late teens that I started feeling more of an urge to just write lyrics and write things that I wanted to sing about. I remember like one time kind of looking at my list of songs on a set list or something early on and kind of thinking, man, all these songs, I like these songs, but I don't really feel like they're things that I really connect to saying or singing about in a certain way. So that was like really when I started thinking I should write some stuff that's like things I want to sing about or stories that I want to tell. And so it was really kind of leading into my late teens, early 20s that I think really trying to write in a way that felt authentic to the kind of music that I would make if it were just me kind of started to become more of a desire, I guess.
Was working with Allison Krauss, like I know you worked with her on I don't think it was your first record, but like your first sort of major record. Was she encouraging in that way? Because I mean, that's such a thing, such a part of her world. Was she sort of pushing you to write material for that record too?
No, not really. At that point,
okay.
Allison she's always been somebody that's been an unbelievable interpreter of other people's songs. And so she doesn't really write herself, and she has a way of like finding these amazing songs, much like, her hero, my hero, Tony Rice was, in that, he maybe wrote a little bit, but not much, but he had a way of like choosing the songs that when you hear either Allison or Tony do, it doesn't matter that they didn't write it. You think that it's absolutely theirs, that they have a way of making them their own. And so not really. I mean, she never, I don't know. I guess she and I really haven't talked about songwriting very much, but the importance of a song speaking to you and meaning something to you. I remember the first time that I played her something off my Daybreak album, which was my second Rounder album, this song, All Because of You, that I had written. I remember her being excited about that one because I had written it, and her being encouraging in that way that I was exploring that and being like, cool, now, like, this is, her sort of saying, yeah, keep following that. But it was more probably after I sort of was starting to decide that was something that I felt like I needed to do. And then I remember her being encouraging about that.
Right. So you worked with her on the Secrets record, right?
Well, not as a producer per se. She was involved in the process, in that when I first signed with Rounder Records, I mean, Rounder was the label I dreamed of being on as a kid because Allison was on that label, and Tony Rice and so many of my heroes, had recorded for that label. So I signed my record deal pretty early on, but it was a few years before I actually, ended up getting in the studio and doing anything. And at the time when I signed, Allison was going to produce the record, and that was something we were talking about. But then, she made this record with Robert Plant, and all these various projects were happening where she was kind of tied up, and it became clear that we weren't going to actually be able to get it done anytime soon. So she kind of just encouraged me, like, I don't want to be the reason that you're not able to get this done. Why don't you work with Ron Block, who's been a longtime member of Allison's band? So Ron was actually we did that record together, and Allison, suggested some songs and was still part of the process in a way that, she was sort of on the outside, giving some thoughts and stuff like that. But I really have Ron to thank for, being the person that really got in there and helped me make that record.
Yeah. Jumping ahead to your recent record, which I know just came out like probably a week or two before the pandemic really hit. But so 25 Trips. I love the way that it's sort of like, there's definitely bluegrass elements to it, whether it's the vocals, some of the harmonies are kind of like that. There's some really traditional stuff in there, but there's also some really progressive kinds of music, and there's a lot of cool like textural things that I'd imagine that was something that you really wanted to kind of, get into some different directions in the studio. Can you tell me about how that record came together and what the intention was from the beginning, whether that was something that you wanted to branch out and really go in some different directions or not?
Yeah, I knew that with 25 Trips, I wanted to make a record that still held true to some of the things that I had discovered and learned through my process of making the record that I made with Bela, Weighted Mind, which was sort of a bit like a singer-songwriter offering surrounding mandolin and vocals. I mean, that was kind of the goal with that record, to really explore my songwriting and put that at the forefront of it. But at the same time, with all the pieces stripped away to where it was mostly mandolin and vocals, it changed the approach that I took to my arranging of the songs, I guess, and thinking about trying to really put my voice, whatever that was, like artistic voice, should I say, at the center of it, in a way that maybe I hadn't explored with my more bluegrass records, because there's, this element of when you're playing in the bluegrass context, it's so band dynamic where you play rhythm and then you have a moment for your solo, and there's sort of a tradition to the song structure and things like that. And so kind of stripping all that away just made me explore more outside influences of other genres, or my songwriting, like things that I was writing didn't necessarily feel like bluegrass per se in that traditional sense. So I knew that from a songwriter standpoint, I still wanted that element to be at the forefront of what became 25 Trips. But I didn't want to necessarily just make another record that was so sparse and stripped down. I wanted to kind of add back in the element of having more of a full band sound, but to think about the arranging of it still being woven between my instrumental self and my vocal self. And then also use the studio in a different way, rather than just feeling like I had to go in and track everything simultaneously, live, and it being like, okay, well, somebody else is going to come in and sing harmony, or somebody else is going to play guitar on this because, that's just what we do. I kind of wanted this to be a combination of some of that, but also having some things where we sort of just started with mandolin and voice and then layered and built things in the studio. So some of it was like just starting with the mandolin and the voice, not unlike Weighted Mind, but then being able to kind of layer from there. And some of that was me layering. Some of it was bringing in other people to layer, and kind of one piece at a time, almost like slow painting, rather than just going in and everybody does their thing, and that's what it becomes, which there's something really special about that too. But there's also something kind of interesting, I think, about being able to go, we're going to start here, and I'm not sure what this is going to become. So, okay, now let's add bass. What if we put pedal steel on this? Oh, but more like indie steel, textural stuff. Well, let's try that. Okay. What happens if we add piano to this? That kind of a thing. So it left a little bit of like artistic freedom in that way to kind of explore as one piece got added, then kind of step back and go, where are we at now? Do we need more? Do we need something else? Maybe we need some cool harmonies, that kind of a thing.
So that was always the intention? Like you went in with the intention of recording the song kind of solo with fully planning to bring stuff in, but you didn't know what it would be.
Yeah, somewhat. I mean, there were a couple tracks where I did a song called Poison, The Last Minute, How Long. There's a few things off the record that we did go in with a particular band in mind. So we had Stuart Duncan and Bryan Sutton, Justin Moses, my husband, Viktor Krauss, and we knew that was kind of going to be the core band, and that these would be tracks that are cut live with that energy. But then there's tracks like 25 Trips itself, or Escape, even what became Beautifully Out of Place or Middle of the Woods, those were tracked with like some live elements, but then also layered on top of that. So it was really this kind of combination of some songs, we knew this is what it's going to be. This band is, we're going to track it, and there probably won't be much layering after the fact, unless it's just some harmony stuff or whatever. And then some things where it was literally, kind of like, well, I'm not sure I know what this is going to become yet. So let's just start building and see what happens. Right. And then, you kind of get surprised as the process goes along, or one piece being added makes you informs what the next piece of the puzzle is, and then sometimes you might try something and go, oh yeah, that didn't work. Like, let's just take that off. Or you're trying things, which was fun to kind of have that freedom.
Some of the string stuff, like Beautifully Out of Place, does have that really cool, the string sectional sort of thing. Was that something that, did you kind of arrange something for them to play, or did you just bring people in that you thought would be good at that? And how organic was that?
Very organic. Yeah, that whole section. Okay. So I remember being like, I had the plan for, so Beautifully Out of Place was tracked with myself, Viktor Krauss, a guy named Mike Seal, who was touring with me some at the time, playing electric guitar, and then Justin, my husband, was there, though I think he didn't end up actually tracking that with us, and then a guy named Alex Hargraves playing fiddle. And so there was the basic thing of the song, and I was like, okay, well, the song's it's in E, but then the chorus goes to G. It changes the key center, and then the soloing happens. But I was like, but I want to get back to E. And I think the way to do that is through this, it needs to have this really flurry of a moment. It was such a, sometimes how these people understand my poor descriptions of what I'm looking for is, beside me. A lot of it is me going, okay. So I think the guitar can lead this moment, whatever this is. And some kind of, I said, thing where if you can end up on a B note, I think, I said, which will work because there's that connection between the B note and E and G. So I was like, if you can just like make some sort of crescendo line that winds up here, then that allows me to land back here. So a lot of that was actually in the moment where I was like sitting there with Mike and we were trying some stuff, kind of ripping back and forth. And then he just starts like playing this really cool thing. And the line he played was all him. That wasn't me saying, play this exact thing. It was just me kind of guiding the process. And then he played this thing and I'm like, yes, that's awesome. Okay. Then we'll just all come back in, to E again and be back in that key. And so then with somebody like Alex, who was playing it, all those string parts are him. He just layered on top. So then it was like, hey, so now if you can go back in and like stack some things, because I want this to feel fat in this section. Can you go back in and stack some things? And then I was like, literally just like, give me some, I don't even remember how I explained it to him, but just like some, where it just literally feels like we're just like,
Yeah.
And like he just went in and started trying stuff and playing stuff and it just started to come together in this really organic way. So yeah, none of it was like
scripted,
pre thought out in a scripted way, but there was the general concept of what the goal was. And then you just choose the right people who know how to decipher my crazy talk,
The drum stuff is really interesting too, because it's not, you're not at all relying on the drums like as the timekeeper. It's more of like a textural palette thing.
The drums were all the last piece of the puzzle, believe it or not, which is so weird.
Wow.
In that, I think we weren't sure. We kind of made the record without drums to start with. And then just started realizing, well, something like Middle of the Woods could be really cool with drums. And I'd be really anxious to hear that. And as a mandolin player, that's something that it's tricky business in a way, because my instrument is the rhythmic element in so much of the music that I make. And so it has to be the right fit, both the right person to play on it and also to make sure that it's not just completely like covering up what I do.
Totally.
So it's like, I've always been a little hesitant to figure out how that could fit in, but also at the same time, if you're hearing something and it sort of is just begging for it, then there's that part of like, well, I don't want to be scared to go there either, Yeah. And so, that was actually the last thing. And so then it was like,
so who does the drum stuff on there?
A guy named Jano Rix, who
I know
with
Jano,
the Wood Brothers.
Wood Brothers,
But anyway, Jano's amazing. And, I don't know that just anybody could go in and add drums on top of something that wasn't cut to a click. That wasn't.
Oh, so you weren't cutting to a click ever?
No. Well, what we did is, in order to keep things feeling really organic. So like Beautifully Out of Place and Middle of the Woods was not cut to a click. Those were just tracked. And so those are a couple things that have drums on them. Something like 25 Trips, or there's a track called Waiting that we added drums to. Those have parts that kind of speed up and slow down, and it's not just like one groove or one tempo throughout the whole song. So on a song like 25 Trips, I knew that if we cut it to a click and we just tried to straighten it all out, it would lose some of its magic, kind of. So what I was able to do is I worked with this really great engineer as my co-producer on this record, Shani Gandhi. And Shani and I, on a track like that, those couple tracks were ones that we built from the ground up. And so we went in and I would actually just play and sing at the same time and find a performance, like try a few things and find one that felt right. So like, okay, here's the right organic way I would play this. Like if I'm slowing down in this vocal section or speeding up a little bit in this instrumental section because it needs to lean forward a little bit, then that's sort of the way this song needs to feel. Then she would go in and she actually built a moving click.
Wow.
So she would like kind of take my live performance and then find a a moving click. And then what that allowed us to do is for me to do multiple passes that had the same, where I would just kind of follow this moving click and we could try stuff that way, but sort of have a template that we were working off of. And so then whoever, came in to overdub on it essentially could choose to use our moving click if they so wished, or just go, this is too weird, I'm not going to use it.
Yeah, Jano is insanely musical, and
totally.
You're right. Like one of the few people that could probably jump in at that point when everything else is finished and actually be an effective percussionist more than a drummer.
Absolutely, and make it feel like he was there in the room with us when it happened.
It does. It feels exactly like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So he definitely did an amazing job, and I know that's always just like the weirdest task to ask somebody to add drums as the last thing
after the fact.
The fact. But, it's one of those things that I actually think, it probably made it feel more organic in some ways than it might have had we had drums and then I'm sort of following that. You know what I'm saying? As opposed to having something sort of follow the natural rhythmic inflections that as a mandolin player I would have, which is usually, kind of more on the front or more, it's just a different kind of thing. So, it was, it all kind of came together, but it was all just very organic in some ways. And, up until the very end kind of going, okay, yeah, we think we are going to add drums to Escape after all. And we are going to, see what that's like.
And was Shani somebody that you'd had your eye on for, obviously her ability to record acoustic instruments is well known through her work with Gary Pachoza and people like that. But was she somebody that you thought would be a good collaborator in the creative sense?
Shani and I had worked together a little bit. And of course, I knew her through Gary. And of course, Gary, having recorded all my favorite albums over the years and all the Allison albums I've loved and things like that, obviously, Shani has learned so much from him in that way. And at the time I was trying to figure out who I was going to work with, and I was talking to a few different people, and I kind of didn't have like I didn't have a Bela in mind. You know what I mean? I didn't have like another artist or somebody that I knew or a producer per se that I just thought, is the perfect person for this. And so I kind of thought, well, I've already got a pretty good idea of the songs and things like that I think I want to do. But sonically, I want to be able to feel like I can explore, and I want somebody that can really, like, if I want to layer a bunch of things or I want to have some like ethereal type sounds, I want somebody that I know knows how to understand my vision for that, because I'm not going to be able to say, I can more now having worked through making a record like that. But at the time, especially, I was just kind of like, well, I want somebody that kind of understands how to help me put that together. And so I started, thinking about different people. And, when I finally started thinking about Shani, she was living up in New York for a short period of time. Around the time that I made this decision to work with her. And so I was up in New York doing a show, and we ended up just grabbing a coffee to kind of talk about the idea, of possibly working on this project together. And I actually had kind of thought it might be fun to record in New York and just get out of Nashville and do something different. She ended up moving back to Nashville at the time, so it just made more sense to do it here. But it was one of those things where there was a few different things about thinking with working with her. And then we met, and it's just, she's only a few years older than me. I mean, she's young. She's a woman. Like, she's extremely talented. There was just a camaraderie, even just in our having coffee together, that was like, man, we would have fun making a record together. We would really have fun. And like, I know she's like excellent at what she does. And not only that, but just the vibe I could tell was going to be really good. And so that's when I was kind of like, I think that was the first thing that I got like super excited about, and of course she was down to dive in and do, jump on board and make this record with me. And so, little did I know just, how strong her work ethic even was. But I mean, she's definitely, cares about things being as good as they can possibly be. And, every little bit of, the tiniest tweak on the mic, all those kind of things that, I'm obsessing over my world and she's obsessing over her world. And we just kind of get each other in that way. So it was really fun to get to work with her.
Yeah. And were you guys bashing the ideas around about like, a string section would be cool here or drums would be cool here? Was that a thing that you were collaborating on a lot?
Yeah, I mean, the whole process was really so collaborative in that way that,
cool.
She often says, well, you're the musician, like you really know this, but she doesn't almost give herself enough credit in that she really has an unbelievable ear. She's not necessarily she grew up playing classical piano a little bit, just through her family dynamic and stuff like that, and that being part of her upbringing, but she wouldn't consider herself a musician, but she's got an unbelievable ear. So she can say, what if you tried this harmony part? She's not somebody that would ever act like she could sing, but she can't, you know what I mean? So it's like, that was fun to work with somebody that definitely kind of understood what the goal was, or like our idea of what was good, or who might be a good fit for something, actually locked into place pretty well.
Cool.
In that regard.
And where'd you guys work? Where'd you do all this recording?
We did a lot of it at the time. She was renting a studio, and she's more of a mix engineer than anything. I mean, that's really what her world is most of the time. But she had a small half of a studio that she was renting in Berry Hill from this guy Marshall Altman. I don't know if you know Marshall, but
no,
he's just another producer, engineer in town, songwriter guy. But so she had her mix room, and then this one tiny little extra room that we just kind of set up shop in, and that's where we started building the tracks that were just me and her. That's where we did all of that stuff. And then the stuff that we tracked live, we did it at Southern Ground, which of course is no more now, and a studio called Addiction Sound.
Oh yeah, Dave Kalmuski's place.
Yeah, exactly. So we did
Canadian.
Yeah, exactly. So those were the two studios that we did the tracking, and then the rest of it, and I recorded a few things at home. It was kind of, some of it was sort of all put together.
Well, it sounds amazing.
Thank you so much.
That's been out for a while. You're going out with Cory Wong. You've been doing this stuff with Bela. Is there plans afoot to do another solo record?
Yeah, I mean, I've already been recording some. So it's like part of me is just like, I've got lots of new music in terms of, not lots of new songs and ideas. So I've, already been tracking a little bit. Part of me is like, I've just been trying to have the mindset of just, working on stuff, even if I'm not quite sure yet what the overall plan is for it, or how it's all going to come together, or whether everything I've recorded will be on one project or multiple things. But just, trying to, it tends to take me a long time to make records, and I wish that wasn't the case. I think I just care so much about it, and I'm sort of like one of those people that I don't want to just, throw something out there just for the sake of just throwing something out there. I really want it to feel like it's a, legit offering. But at the same time, we also live in a world where music is consumed so differently these days, and there's something to be said about, feeling like it's okay to put something out, not feel like, your whole musical expression and artistic, career hinges upon it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So
I do. I know exactly what you're saying.
I'm trying to find that balance between the part of me that really just loves like the story of a full album offering, and still caring about that, and what I'm putting forth, and wanting to make sure that it's me trying to give the best of what I have, but also, not just feeling like I can never do anything either, because that can be a paralyzing place to get into, where it's hard to ever get anything done because it never feels good enough to you. So,
yeah, that's the beauty of recording yourself at home. You can sit there for months.
I know.
Laboring over every note.
I know.
Well, I know you got to run, and thanks so much for spending time with me. It's been great to talk to you and hear about all this stuff.
Oh my gosh,
and I love what you're doing, and
I really
best of luck out
that.
there on the road.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate, all the great questions, and hopefully we'll cross paths in person one of these days.
I hope so. I hope to see your show here when you're playing. I think you're playing at Brooklyn Bowl, right?
We are. Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully I'll see you there.
Okay. Awesome. All right.
Awesome.
Thanks, Sierra. I appreciate it.
Okay.
All
Thanks,
right.
Steve. See you later.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Folks, thank you so much for listening. That was my conversation with Sierra Hull. I hope you enjoyed it. I had a blast speaking with her, and we'll see you in a couple weeks for another chilling episode of Music Makers and Soul Shakers. We'll see you then. Music Makers and Soul Shakers is produced at the Hen House Studio in Nashville, Tennessee by Steve Dawson. Please remember to subscribe to the show and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. You can find more info on this episode, including show notes and an audio playlist at makersandShakerspodcast.com. Thanks again to our amazing sponsors this season, Ear Trumpet Labs, Union Tube and Transistor, Black Mountain Picks, Isotope, and Spectra 1964. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.